Okay, so I am going to go over the Week 10 content overview here. So the week's theme, as you can see, is natural resource management. So before I begin, I want to mention to please watch these short videos. They're just a couple minutes long each. It's something called anaerobic digestion, which is just a really incredible sustainability application / technology. Um, and it's one of my favorites because it's this almost entirely circular technology that takes organic, what would other be called waste, but we can call it a resource now if we use it here. So it takes organic material that would otherwise be wasted, and then you put it in this tank. Okay, there's like these big tanks that are, whatever, 20, 30 feet tall. I mean, you can actually make it any size. You can make a backyard one if you really want to. I've seen one at a local college. And so you basically put the organic waste in there, and there's some bacteria in there that digest it, and they create methane and CO2. Okay, and so the methane, which if you remember from the energy lesson, so methane is what natural gas is mostly made of. And so when you burn natural gas, like in a furnace, that's mostly methane. And so with anaerobic digestion, you take this organic material and then you basically make methane out of it. And it's usually called, you can call it green methane if you want, or clean methane, because when you burn it, you release CO2 when you burn it, but it's a carbon neutral fuel source. In other words, you take organic material like a plant, right? It takes CO2 out of the atmosphere, and then you convert it into methane, and when you burn it, you release that CO2 back out into the atmosphere. So even though you release CO2, it's by definition, by physics, by the laws of physics, it's no more CO2 than it actually absorbed originally. So it's carbon neutral, which is great. And the other good thing is, so then you have methane that you can burn, have clean natural gas, which you can use to run a generator or have heat. You can capture the heat from that process as well. And then the leftover from the process is called digestate, and it's this really rich organic material that you can then put back in your farm field. So it's this, and then you grow more food, you put it in a digester, and so on, right? So it's this circular resource loop, and it's amazing. You can use cow manure, you can use whatever, any kind of manure from any animal. In limited amounts, you can actually use human waste as well. And so it's just this really great process. I've seen a bunch of these in different locations, including one just over the border in Pennsylvania. And so it's really a neat technology, something to keep your eye on because it is accessible and people do use it. It's a great application for farmers. Okay, so I want you to take a look at that, and then we're going to go over resource management. A lot of this has to do with waste management. So we'll talk about the reduce, reuse, recycle, which you may not realize that this is actually a hierarchy. In other words, ideally you reduce your waste in the first place. So in other words, don't create it. The second priority is to reuse it. So reuse it without upcycling or whatever. And then recycling, which is what most people associate with quote unquote sustainable waste management. That's actually the third priority. So that's the last option that you want to. It's still good. It's better than throwing it in a landfill, but the ideal is just not create the waste in the first place. Okay, so we'll go over some of the just some sort of facts and figures and what each of these things mean. And then we'll go over the concept of zero waste and circular resource use, which I just alluded to. But so zero waste is an idea. It's sort of a standard that you try to achieve, but it's actually impossible to achieve truly zero waste just because of the for being specific, the second law of thermodynamics. There's always some degradation of the material, but circular resource use is really, really, really important concept in sustainability. So I want to make sure you keep that in your mind. It is something that can be applied to just about anything, and the idea basically is that instead of having this linear resource use where we take something, we extract a resource, we build something out of it, we use it, and then we throw it away, right? So it's linear. Extract, use, throw out, extract, right? So it's a one-way street, so to speak. So with circular resource use, instead of throwing it out, what you do is you take that what you would otherwise get rid of and you loop it back into your your cycle. And so you're just using those resources, reusing them as much as humanly possible. Okay, and so that's our circular resource flow. Very, very, very important concept. There's something called circular. Basically, circular thinking, if you will, is just a way to sort of like reuse as many resources as you can. Okay, and then we'll get into some really sort of specific certification and applications of sustainable waste and resource management, the Marine Stewardship Council and Forest Stewardship Council, and also aquaponics. So these are certifications. If you've ever seen this logo, this FSC logo, it's on any paper or wood product or anything you can make out of a tree. And so it's a pretty robust third-party standard where some product, it could be, you'll see it, like I think Lowe's and Home Depot all use only FSC wood now. And it just means that it's sustainably managed, the indigenous rights were respected, and a few other things. So basically, it's a way to make sure we're not like clear-cutting forests, that we can manage them more sustainably. And so what's nice is, you know, in a perfect world, it's like it's easy as possible to make a more sustainable decision. And so if you're just shopping for something, a paper product, whatever, you name it, tissues, toilet paper, wood, furniture, wood furniture, whatever it is, you just look for this FSC logo and you know that it is at least relatively sustainable. Okay, so that's the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. And then we have the Marine Stewardship Council, which is very similar, but for seafood. So it's basically a sustainable seafood label. That, again, it's a third party, so it's, you know, it's independent, and it just, you know, makes sure that whatever seafood it is not being overfished. It's not using certain types of trawler technologies and so forth. Okay, so basically trying to sustainably manage seafood, which is a really major protein source for people across the world. And again, if you're shopping for seafood, whether it's frozen fish in the, you know, grocery store, or you go out to a restaurant or whatever, and you want to know, like, is it MSC certified? And they should know if it is or isn't. And you just look for that label. Okay, so and I have some other. The Monterey Bay Aquarium has a really nice guide. If you do buy or eat seafood very often, that this is a really nice guide here to help you make sustainable seafood decisions. Some are better than others. And there's some just short videos about different unsustainable fishing techniques, just to give you a real sense of like the physical like aspects of unsustainable fishing. And then lastly, or not lastly, but last for this section, you have something called aquaponics, which again is another one of my favorite applications. This is something you can scale up and down. I mean, you can put one of these in your backyard. You can put it in a living room. Like, you can make it like a fish tank size, but everything up to big farms. And so aquaponics is another circular resource technique where you take you have fish, which normally the waste builds up. You know, like a fish tank has a filter in it. That's to prevent that waste from building up. Well, there's a natural way to do that. You basically take that waste, and there's bacteria that then digest it, and they convert it into nitrate, which is then can be used as fertilizer, a natural fertilizer. For mostly, it's better for leafy greens than anything else. But basically, so you have the fish, and then you take what otherwise would, you know, harm the fish. You use that as a resource to grow crops, and then the crops actually clean the water, and then you circle that water back into the fish tank, and they have clean water. And it's this loop. It's a continuous loop that uses like 90 to 95% less water than normal farming. It's a really interesting application. It can be scaled up or down. And we'll see something like this out in Colorado as well. So I wanted to introduce that to you. And then finally, I want to introduce you to this cradle-to-cradle certification in the circular economy. So cradle-to-cradle certification is a way, it's a certification, again, another third-party certifier that certifies basically any product can undergo cradle-to-cradle certification, and it has to meet very strict standards in terms of being to not being toxic, to using 100% renewable energy, to basically being designed from the outset to reintegrate all of the aspects of that product back into the system. So it goes beyond just being recyclable to the point of like, with recycling, it's sort of like, okay, it's up to you, the consumer, to figure out how to recycle, where to recycle, when to recycle, all that. With Cradle to Cradle, it's incumbent upon the designer of the original product to design it so that it can be entirely reused, non-toxic, and just like basically continuous resource use. And there's a short TED Talk from one of the original creators of the Cradle to Cradle concept here, and a short reading. And then we end with the circular economy, which is an application of the circular thinking to economics, obviously. And so this is something that's been around for the better part of 10 or 15 years. And again, it's a way to rethink the way we design products mostly. And so it's a way to design them to be reused, to kind of get away from this individual ownership model as much as possible. So for example, instead of buying a washing machine, you sort of effectively rent or lease the washing machine from the company, and then when you're done with it, instead of like throwing it out and putting it in a landfill, you give it back to the company and then that they fix it up and reuse it, whatever, right? So it's this getting away from the idea like we have to own everything and we're done with it, we throw it out. It's sort of like, what do we actually use the thing for? And you're paying for the service, not the thing, if that makes sense. And they do this with in some areas they do this with lighting. Why do we have lights? We don't really care about owning the lights. We just want our room to be light enough, right? And so there's a model where you sort of basically rent the lights from the company, and when they break, they take them back or they come and fix them. And so that helps to minimize our resource use. So there's all kinds of aspects of the circular economy. This is something that, if you're paying attention, is definitely out there. So yeah, so this is a really there's a lot in this lesson, so I hope you take the time to really go through it all. A lot of this stuff, we will see various aspects of this in a bunch of different ways when we travel to Colorado, so I want you to consider that as well. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy the content, and as always, if you have any questions, just reach out.